This is my media evaluation video for how to use media technologies in the construction, research, planning and evaluation stages. So, starting with research and planning, I started with Netflix. As a member, I could watch shows such as Blackfish and also Abstract, which gave me a professional insight to shots that they use in the industry, soundtrack, and a general feel for the documentary television genre. I also use websites such as BBC, as they have the show What Do Artists Do All Day, which was another creative TV documentary, which is slightly different to the others because it's more niche and the same subgenre as mine, which was to gain interest and pivotal for me in learning the conventions of a creative TV documentary. After this, I then went on and made a list of conventions that I wanted to conform to and those that I wanted to challenge. This made it easy for me during the production stage, as it allows me to make a TV documentary with certain kind of traditional connotations and conventions of a TV documentary in my subgenre, and with a unique edge challenging some of those conventions. I also use websites such as Vimeo, as it allows me to find inspirations in other filmmakers' work, as it's a more professional site, especially for young filmmakers. I could gain interest and inspiration from them to see how they're working compared to mine. And then I use YouTube to watch a lot of behind-the-scenes videos on shoots to see how directors work with their cast and interviewees, and also YouTube shows about framing and kind of interviewing and documentary filmmaking on channels like Indie Mogul and DSLR Guide. So then moving on to cameras. Cameras are obviously really important in filmmaking, and especially documentary filmmaking, because you want to make sure you can always have a camera readily available to capture that moment in that documentary or capture that kind of interview. So my kind of main camera was the Canon 5D Mark IV. It's a kind of camera I've used for about 6 months now and find it very useful, especially for interviews, as I can kind of shoot up to qualities of 4K and then crop down if I want to come a bit closer in and kind of shoot wide and crop down to 1080p. It's very sharp and captures the detail well, which makes it look aesthetically pleasing for interviews and kind of gives you that industry level edge. I also shot on 24 frames per second with a shutter speed of around kind of a 40th of a second, as that's kind of the closest to the human eye, so my video looks natural. I also used an ISO of 400 because I didn't want to get kind of noise within my image. Fortunately, I didn't need to go higher than this because there was lots of natural light coming in from the surrounding windows. And then I kept a low aperture of around, or low to medium aperture of 5.6 f-stop to keep my interview in focus when filming, and also the music, I went from the music to keep that in focus. But I didn't want too much depth of field, but I also didn't want everything to be in focus, kind of. Otherwise I wouldn't have much texture in my image, so kind of a medium aperture allowed me to gain this. I then also shot a second camera, which was my Canon 70D. It's a really versatile camera, which has a flip screen that makes it really useful for handheld shots, so you can always see what's happening, even when getting kind of an extremely low or extreme kind of high angle shots. The flip screen is really useful, and it shoots 1080p and is useful as a kind of backup second camera. Then I moved on to lenses. It was really important for my shoot, kind of like a creative element that allowed me to gain a plethora of kind of professional shots that I gained in my research and planning stage for my shot list, and yeah, it really helped me kind of take my filmmaking to that next level. So I shot on my main lens, which is the 24 to 105mm. It's a really good versatile lens because you can go kind of really close in and then quite wide, but it's got really good autofocus, so I don't have to worry about kind of always trying to keep my subject in focus. And it's kind of really just good, crisp lens. I then went on to a wider lens, which was the kind of 12 to 24mm. It's not full frame, but neither is the Canon 70D, so you couldn't tell it worked well. And it was important, this wide lens, because it was quite a small room we were shooting in, but the wide angle made it look bigger than it was, and it gave it this kind of a professional look. And lenses are really important, as they can be the kind of make or break for a good film technically, but they also allow you to kind of manipulate the location that you're in. Then for sound, I used the Zoom H4 box, which was a sound box which is really useful, kind of picks up sound really well, it's sensitive, good quality, and it isn't too big as well, kind of fits in your camera bag, it's multi-directional, so you can kind of pick up the sound from like everywhere in the room, and it's especially good for music, because you can adjust the levels as well as you're going. Then for the interviews, I used the Rode directional mic. It allowed me to pick up kind of the sound of just the interview, what they're talking about, but I didn't use it for the music because it's directional mic, so I wouldn't be able to pick up the piano and the other instrument as well. When it comes on to the editing, I used Adobe Premiere Pro. to edit on, because it's kind of the professional industry standard, and let me take my quality of work again to that kind of professional level that I wanted it to be at. Alongside kind of Premiere Pro, I used After Effects, which is what I edited my ident on, and I was kind of slightly familiar with it before, but wanted to use tracking in my ident, which I hadn't used before. I had to teach myself. It was really beneficial, so I can use it in the future and kind of use effects and presets of the glass smashing, which is a really cool element with After Effects. And for audio, I didn't have Foley sound, so I didn't really need to have kind of softwares to mix my audio on, but I did actually mix some kind of sound on Logic Pro X, which was to make sure my decibel levels weren't too high or peaking with my interview sound from the Zoom box. So I kind of put that on Logic, made sure that was kind of all even, and then exported it and matched it with my footage on Premiere Pro. I also use YouTube, which is good for getting feedback, easy to comment on, and quite generic, easy for most people, and really useful, so I could share my product to a wide audience. And then I also used Vimeo, which was kind of a more professional filmmakers. It's got kind of a young kind of filmmaking community, which is really good to get feedback from other young filmmakers, but also from professionals. And was kind of like a step up kind of from YouTube to Vimeo to kind of get that more professional feedback. And then I also use obviously like social media like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to share and get direct feedback of what they thought on my film. I did come across some technical difficulties on the way, such as After Effects, which was when it was kind of rendering, taking time, and I was working out how to use the tracking, but in the end I did get there. But it was kind of working out how to render at kind of certain bit rate and to get the best quality, but also because at some point it wasn't rendering, but I kind of used some YouTube tutorials to kind of get over that hurdle. And then I also had some technical difficulties on set, as it was quite a small venue, and I could only bring 2 tripods, which are not as kind of as stable and strong as I'd like them to be, because the vibrations from the instruments made the floor slightly shake. It was like an older building. But I used the warp stabilizer on Premiere Pro to overcome this. I could also I only bring small kind of sound recording equipment. Although it did work, kind of a boom mic for the interview, it might have been a bit nicer to get kind of slightly crispier and clear audio. I also found that it was hard to manage 2 cameras and 2 microphones on my own and to get kind of range of shots. However, I did have a friend to help me, but they weren't too familiar with the technical side. Therefore, I spent a lot of time setting up and kind of manning the cameras, when I could be more focused on asking better questions or maybe different questions and kind of to advance the storyline more. But I was kind of stuck more worrying about the technical side, which is something I might change if I was to redo it in the future. My ancillary tasks. I used Photoshop and InDesign to create a template for my film. I used InDesign as it's kind of the professional standard for magazines and newspaper adverts, and it was an easy tool to learn and very useful. I learned with a few YouTube tutorials, and it really helped me advance the quality of my work. If I was to kind of distribute my magazine cover or newspaper kind of magazine cover, I used the PDF format, as it would allow me to publish an online magazine, or I could publish it in a print magazine, and it would still come out at really high quality. For the newspaper, to edit the images on, I used kind of newspaper advert to edit the images on. I used Adobe Lightroom, which was really beneficial, as kind of all the Adobe softwares are interlinked because it was Adobe Lightroom CC. I meant I could transfer the images between kind of the Adobe Creative Package really well. And Lightroom kind of helps as you can get a kind of crisp, sharp image, and using the sliders to adjust your highlights, your shadows. It also really allows you to manipulate the photo to get that look that I was kind of looking for. My first evaluation question, I decided to use infographic. My first evaluation question was, what ways does your media product use, develop, challenge forms and conventions of real media products? I saw that infographic was a good software with a layout so I could easily compare things. It was quite narrow and sleek, and also saw that it was a unique but creative way of presenting information that was different to the usual kind of presentation way. I also saw that it was easy to present other media inside my infographic, such as images, videos, and being able to compare my film to real media texts. Then for my evaluation question number 2, how effective is the combination of your main product and ancillary tasks? I decided to do a podcast for this question. This was because it was a form of media that I had not used yet and wanted to branch out in kind of different creative mediums. And after recently starting a podcast about passion of mine, which is kind of music and hip hop, I realised that it's a great way to take information in, because you have to focus and listen because there's no visual element, which is a kind of a thing of podcast. It's kind of conventional podcast. As this question had a lot of interesting information about all three of my products, I thought it would be a good way to clearly get my point across and engage the listener. And then for my third valuation question, what have you learned from your audience feedback? I decided to use Emaze as it's a more traditional presentation software, but it also gives me the option to create a presentation I can export in different ways, such as I can embed it onto my blog easily. I can also export it as a PDF or export it as a video slideshow. This has given me a wide choice and is unique compared to a normal kind of presentation software. It was also good because I could easily attach photos and other forms of media onto it, which was good for when I was kind of putting together my presentation. And then that kind of leads me on to my last valuation question, which is this one. How did you use media technologies in the construction, research, planning and evaluation stages? I decided to do a video to present this evaluation question because it's informative with pictures and clips that can pop up on the side, which is why I frame myself on one side of the image. And also it's a nice aesthetic and visual way to end my evaluations.